educators, welcome to EduTalk Collaborative Conversations, the show where passionate educators converge to talk about all things teaching. In every episode of EduTalk, we delve into an insightful educational research study, and we hear from a dynamic panel of educators who discuss the study and translate the findings into tangible tools for our everyday endeavors in education. I am your host, Jeni, and I can't wait to share this episode's study with you and introduce you to today's panel of educators joining me right here on set at KPAO Omaha Community Television. I'm thrilled that you're joining us today. You are an important part of this growing community of empowered educators. I believe we can transform education one conversation at a time. So without further ado, let's delve into today's topic. In today's society, the role of educators extends far beyond delivering academic content. It includes nurturing the psychological and emotional well-being of students. Today, we are going to discuss the article, Trauma-Informed Practices in Schools Across 2 Decades, an Interdisciplinary Review of Research. It's actually a chapter, and it's published in the Review of Research in Education, co-authored by M. Shelley Thomas and Judy Vanderhaar. Why are trauma-informed practices so vital in today's educational landscape? The answer lies in their power to transform the lives of students. Traumatic experiences, whether rooted in abuse, neglect, loss, or other disruptive life events, can profoundly affect a child's ability to learn and interact socially. By implementing effective trauma-informed practices, educators not only aid in mitigating these adverse effects, but also empower students to build resilience, confidence, and academic success. The purpose of this chapter was to provide an interdisciplinary review and summary of research on school-based interventions that address the impacts of trauma. This literature review sought to answer 2 questions. Number 1, what is the dominant framework used for promoting and practicing trauma-informed care in schools? And number 2, how effective are school-based supports for trauma-affected youth at the school level and at the student level? To identify articles for their review, the researchers searched academic databases with the following criteria. Articles had to be peer-reviewed, they had to be empirical, they had to be published between 1998 and 2018, they had to be written in English, and they had to focus on school-aged children. This process identified 4,056 articles. After screening these further, the list was narrowed down to 215 for detailed review, in which 33 articles were then included in the final analysis. Each of the 33 articles were then categorized by discipline and methodology to understand their contributions to learning practices for trauma-affected students. In answer to their first question, research question, the review did not identify a particular framework as dominant among the research for either practicing or researching trauma-informed care in schools. The studies reviewed used many different methods and theories, showing a mixed landscape without a single clear model. Perhaps this lack of a dominant framework underscores the need for developing and adopting standardized guidelines that can provide consistency and clarity. In answer to their second question, the 33 articles explored a total of 33 distinct interventions. Each of these interventions was evaluated to understand its impact and effectiveness. To see a comprehensive list of the interventions and their individual findings, be sure to read the full chapter. To highlight 3, Cognitive Behavioral Intervention for Trauma in Schools, CBITS, Supports for Students Exposed to Trauma, SETS, and Trauma-Informed Leadership Teams, TILT, were all shown to be effective. In summary, this chapter embarked on an exploration of school-based trauma interventions spanning 2 decades. Although no dominant framework was identified, 30 distinct interventions were highlighted for their effectiveness in supporting trauma-affected students. With 2/3 of adults reporting experiences of adverse childhood experiences, also known as types of trauma, the need for approaches that support both student well-being and academic achievement becomes undeniably clear. By implementing effective trauma-informed practices, educators play a crucial role in mitigating these adverse effects, empowering students to build resilience, confidence, and academic success. Up next, our panel of dynamic educators will discuss the implications that this study has on our everyday practices in education. Stay tuned, an insightful conversation awaits.
Please note that the opinions and views expressed by the host and panelists on this show are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of their employers or affiliated organizations.
Welcome back to EduTalk Collaborative Conversations. I'm your host, Jenny, and I'm so glad that you are joining us today. In just a few minutes, you're going to meet our panelists for today, and I can't wait for that. We're going to dig into a conversation about trauma-informed practices, which is a really important conversation, so I'm so glad that you're with us. Today, I'm going to introduce you to two individuals. Actually, they're going to introduce themselves to you. And when you hear their introduction, I just want you to think that your circle of colleagues got just a little bit bigger. So up first, we are going to start with Mackenzie. Thanks for being here today.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Jenny, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so honored you joined us.
Thanks. So I'm Mackenzie White. I am the Technology Integrationist Specialist.
Love.
Currently at Bennington Public Schools. This is my 18th year in education.
Okay.
About half of those years were spent as a school librarian, which I adored. And then I kind of had a call to leadership and came into this technology integrationist role.
Okay.
With the leadership also in library media. I've also had 10 years in adjunct teaching experience for the University of Nebraska at Omaha.
Yep.
In a groundbreaking program in instructional technology leadership.
So good.
Education was not my first calling.
Really?
So I was a criminal justice major with an interest in law before. But then I did that for a couple of years and then decided to take a little break and start my family. And then after becoming a mom, I really just decided that education was kind of more a route that I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And then I really got into the library sciences kind of niche and had a wonderful mentor who kind of helped me to cultivate that and then just to take that on to Bennington Public in this pioneer role that they were not used to at the time. So
that is fascinating. I almost forgot that you were library science. And then, yeah, of course, yeah, you are. And so you're 18 years in.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Lisa, tell us about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Lisa St. Clair. I'm with Omaha Program Evaluation Services. And my journey into education was very different. So my first job out of college was a counselor, a vocational counselor.
Okay.
And over time, I opened my own practice, and I found that there were a lot of these adult men, 40s, who injured their backs as iron workers and other heavy physical jobs.
Okay.
And almost to a T, all of them had dropped out of high school.
Oh, wow.
And I would talk with them about their vocational options, and there weren't that many available to them because they didn't have a high school diploma.
Yeah.
And they talked about getting out of school because they didn't feel like they mattered there. There were no relationships, and they didn't feel welcomed.
Oh.
And so that's when I decided to become a teacher who could make a difference, right? So I made a difference in my classroom, but then that reach wasn't big enough. So I wanted to be a principal. So I became a principal.
Yep.
And then I learned about this thing called program evaluation, where you evaluate schools or other programs. And I just wanted to make the whole world better, a better place for kids and families.
Yes.
And so that's where I ended up. 28 years in education.
28 years.
Yeah, not including evaluation.
Not including evaluation.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got some years under our belt.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so we're going to jump into this conversation. Mackenzie, I'm going to ask you the first question. So reflecting on your experiences, what are the key components or principles that would guide your approach to implementing or the way we should implement trauma-informed practices?
I feel like in my role, there are about 3 things that I kind of concentrate on. And one of those things is understanding trauma's impact. I think it's much more prevalent than folks realize sometimes, and it kind of transcends demographics and communities like no other kind of issue that we're having, along with mental health too.
Yes.
And I think that that is really becoming detrimental to our kids, our students, ways they build relationships, how they learn, and all of those things. So that's one.
Okay. Yeah.
And then a huge part of what I do is supporting educators.
Okay.
So I think that creating and providing professional development around trauma-informed practices is, as well as how we can use technology to integrate that is one of those things. And so one of the things too for our teachers, and we've been doing that for years now, especially since the pandemic, is self-care. Teachers that are in these schools that are serving high populations of students in trauma are really getting burnt out at faster rates, I feel. And so they're so passionate and so giving to students that I feel like it takes a lot out of them. So any way I can, you know, use any kind of applications or research to help them with that is what I do. And then I think at the building and classroom level, just kind of pushing those policies and procedures for trauma-informed practices to just create that more safe environment for kiddos is paramount too.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned teachers because they're on the front lines every day, and we can support them better. Okay. All right, Lisa. Okay, based on your experience as the senior evaluator at Omaha Program Evaluation Services, what common challenges have you observed when teams of educators implement trauma-informed practices?
Okay, the first and the biggest challenge, right? So the first one is when a school adopts this initiative, they're all getting professional development on it. But if there are any individuals, and there always are, anyone who's not buying into the idea, the old punitive method of punishment, zero tolerance, all of that stays.
Right.
So then it becomes a war of mission. Which mission prevails? And I think it's really important to continue to measure how people feel about the mission of trauma-informed care, and that children are getting what they need, not what they deserve, right? So you move from that. Yeah, it's a complete shift. And you have to help the parents shift too, because some of the parents keep that mindset of, that kid did this to my child, therefore I want this thing to happen. It's like we all have to be on the same page. So adopting a trauma-informed practice does not mean it changes between June and August. It's going to be a series of years to change that method, and sometimes some refinement of staff, professional development, sometimes getting new staff on. And a constant conversation with parents about, no, we're not kicking kids out because they had a trigger about something. It could be fight, it could be flight. We're going to keep them here and help them grow.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, Mackenzie, so I love that you've already brought up technology, but in your current role, what are ways that technology can facilitate the creation of a safer or more supportive learning environment for students affected by trauma?
So I think some things that we mentioned, like social emotional learning, where we were pulling some of that stuff from, the integration of that along with restorative practices are best they work better when they're combined, and you use the frameworks for SEL to support that. And I really like that you mentioned that punitive, because we want to move more to the restorative and giving the power back to the folks that have experienced this trauma.
Right.
I think technology is huge, period, in education, but in the world.
Right.
So I feel like leveraging technology for mental health support has become super important, and also very much giving us other tools and access that we may not be able to have, especially like our marginalized populations or those that just struggle, you know, rural communities and things like that, just to have that access. I think it's important to use tech to be able to work on mindfulness, and then also stress reduction programs. So there are applications that will help with the coping skills for those that have mental health issues, as well as issues from trauma. With the use of artificial intelligence, I would be remiss in mentioning that. So that is helping us a little bit, along with telehealth services, which we were just talking about access. Online training modules, things like digital communication tools and educational apps, and different kinds of softwares are really kind of coming to the forefront and helping us a little bit as far as dealing with the masses, I feel like.
Yeah, well said. Thank you so much. Okay, Lisa, back to you. How can teams of educators incorporate, and okay, so one thing I know about you, and I've seen you coach teachers in person, and so you're very strengths focused and you're very passionate, and that comes through with what you do. But one of the things you're passionate about is incorporating student perspectives. and how that shapes a classroom culture. So talk to me for just a few minutes about incorporating student perspectives into the development and evaluation of trauma-informed practices and or curricula.
So I feel like student perspectives have to be brought into every aspect of a school, right?
Yeah.
So you know me in the classroom. So at the classroom level, we use a tool that you're familiar with called the CLASS tool,
Yep.
Classroom Assessment and Scoring System. And the key area of that tool, there's several areas, there's 10, but the key one is regard for student perspectives, right? And so it's how do you empower students to have more autonomy over their learning and voice in their school and voice in their everyday experience. And we measure for that now. And so we've been coaching teachers on get students into small groups within 5 minutes of the start of the lesson. You know how hard that can be. We've talked about this.
We have, yeah.
And one of the teachers took what I said so seriously. It was her first year at this particular school.
Okay.
And she created jobs for each of those groups. And what I loved about it is it fits so well with trauma-informed care. So you had the captain, someone guiding the ship, someone, the questioner, investigator, the recorder, and all these fit on the CLASS tool, right? But the one that I loved for trauma-informed schools was the peacemaker. And so they could be trained, all of the students could be trained in trauma-informed care and being alert to triggers. And the peacemaker could be watching for a trigger and saying, okay, let's pull back a little bit, let's take a second, let's take a breath. You know, they could be helping the teacher implement all of these practices that measure extremely well on the CLASS tool, but also lead to an empowered group of students. I mean, who should be doing the work of learning? The students.
Yep.
Who should be doing the work of trauma-informed care? The students guided by the teacher.
Right. Can you imagine if we lived in a world where everyone was trained to be a peacemaker?
Yes.
And to look out for people's triggers.
How to
and
de-escalate.
respond accordingly?
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Okay. Okay, Mackenzie. Okay, so we're going to end it with another technology question. Is there any trend that's coming our way or specific technology that you think is going to significantly impact our practices going forward?
As we're looking forward, like the future of education or just technology in general?
Either way.
So I feel like us moving forward in technology, we have some work to do. I feel like there is still this weird stigma that people are techie or they're not techie. Technology is a skill. I'm not a tech wizard. I never was. And so I feel like it's a skill that needs to be built. The problem is that I feel like we're not starting early enough. So pre-service teachers really, I don't see that happening in programs that are preparing our teachers to be, you know, equipped to deal with today's classrooms. And so technology is one of those that you would think that it would be on the forefront, but it's just not. And so it kind of depends on if you're getting that education from a mentor or a teacher mentor that you're giving your coursework. And I don't see that that's happening widely across the programs.
I have never thought about this before, but I agree 1,000%. And I just got done co-teaching a course this summer for pre-service teachers. They're getting ready to teach for the first time in the fall, who have not been traditionally trained. So they don't have 4 years of undergrad behind them in education. And this was the first time this summer where we taught them how to use different platforms to maximize AI in their lesson planning. But if you teach them how to do it, what a massive time saver that is for teachers. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, Lisa, here's your final question. Discuss any innovative approaches that you've seen or implemented that have significantly improved either resilience in children or students impacted by trauma.
Well, it's definitely one thing you touched on, one thing I've already shared. So the first one is that restorative justice. Like, what do we need to do to repair this relationship?
Yes.
Teacher to child, child to child, you know, that's just key. And I've seen that implemented widely across the schools I evaluate. The second one is back to that regard for student perspective, right? That piece is so important that I wish every university would teach it to all pre-service teachers about how to build that piece. A colleague of mine, we were working on an evaluation report today, and a colleague of mine was running a correlation between regard for student perspective and academic achievement gains.
Oh gosh.
And high regard for student perspective scores was a 0.62 correlation with the highest student achievement gains. It was huge. And if we knew that, why aren't we teaching it to everybody? I mean, it's so important to get it out there and to be widely used.
Okay, mental note, add that to what I'm doing with pre-service teachers.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to shift gears and we're going to now look towards like what's coming in education. So when you look at the horizon, what's next? What are you either most excited about or most looking forward to?
Besides that, I'm also working. So the part that I teach for the grad classes that I teach at UNO is that tech integration, but I push to try to establish some personalized learning with individuals because everybody has a different skill set. And so I'm excited to see that keep going as we're moving into, you know, uncharted waters with, you know, artificial intelligence and things like that. And then I'm also excited about us just pushing more inclusivity and accessibility for our students, and then putting that in our curricula so that we also have established baselines for teachers. As we just said, not everybody's on the same playing field, it seems.
Right.
So just having those things to be able to provide ongoing support and then foster those learning environments that would then in turn, from our discussion today, for our, you know, trauma-informed practices, just having that safe space.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, Lisa, what are you dreaming about the future?
I dream about so many things. You have 2 hours. I'm just going to take one piece from what you added, right? So thinking of that technology piece and my love of small groups and the importance of building those socialization skills, because if we go too far down the road of technology one-on-one, you become a great one-on-one learner, but how do you work with others?
Okay.
So I want to take what you said and pair it with my love of small group learning. What if there was a way to teach in small groups 4 different learners who spoke 4 different languages and have instant language translation?
Wow.
Like, do you imagine how powerful that would be to have 4 people talking together? Me, as I'm struggling on Duolingo, learning, you know, I used to speak Spanish, but I'm trying to get it back. Just thinking about how powerful that would be to empower them, that language would no longer be a barrier to that group process.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I dream of. Hundreds of others, but that's enough time.
That's amazing. Okay, well, our conversation is winding down here in the studio, but I hope that honestly the conversation is just getting started where you're at. So we want to invite you into this conversation. You can do that a couple of different ways. You can comment right on the YouTube link, or you can share this out on social media. But also, if you are local here in Omaha and you are a passionate educator who loves to talk about important topics in education, I would love to host you here on EduTalk on a future episode. So reach out to me and let's make that happen. And lastly, we are just a couple of weeks out from starting a new school year. And my dream would be for the future is that we would start to elevate our practice. And I would love to highlight some of the education heroes that are right here in Omaha. So I know that you know someone who is doing great things in education, an administrator, a counselor, a teacher, someone who works in a building that if you would nominate them, we could surprise them, show up and surprise them, and then feature them, the work that they're doing here on EduTalk. I hope that you join us again for a future conversation because I really do believe that we can transform education one conversation at a time. Thanks for watching. We want to shine a light on the heroes of education. There's a lot of them. Do you know an educator who's making a positive impact in their school, community, or district? You can recognize them by nominating them for our monthly Educator Spotlight. Each month, we will feature one inspirational educator who's altering the academic landscape for the better. In other words, they're making a difference. Help us celebrate their exceptional contributions to learning and leadership by nominating them today.